But here tonight we have anything but clarity. We have in fact a bank of fog. There is no clarity in relation to the figures, whether it be in relation to houses, the amount of the grant, or in relation to the actual cost of administering the grant. And it's quite clear now that we don't know, this House do not know whether the introduction of these charges is going to cost the taxpayer, cost the state money or not. And Les Ceann Comhairle, I was hoping that the Minister at this stage would have offered the House an adjournment. And I understand that.
Just after arriving
understand.
Here. Yeah. So go ahead, Deputy.
I was saying that I had hoped that at this stage the Minister would have offered the House an adjournment, and I still hope that he might do that. However, if he's not prepared to do that, Les Ceann Comhairle, I would have to propose an adjournment, and my understanding is that under standing orders, that you as Les Ceann Comhairle of the House can make a decision in that regard. And in the event of the Minister offering the adjournment, there will be no need for that, and I hope that's what will happen. But if that's not the case, I would ask you, Les Ceann Comhairle, to adjourn the House until next Tuesday at 2 p.m. to allow the Minister and the Government to come back in to give us some clarity in relation to the various figures that are at issue tonight. Thank you.
Okay.
Minister, this is bizarre, to be honest. Not only are you the Minister, not only are you the Minister for water charges, you're also the Minister for housing. So one would think you would know how many houses are within the state that are being lived in by homeowners or by tenants. So, I mean, if you have the figures, Minister, then let's hear them.
So, Deputy Peter Matthews.
You know, let's put a little bit of context into where we are tonight too. It is only 10 days ago when the government had to revisit the whole scheme of water charges. Following their announcements, the EU officials from the Troika who were here reviewing things tried to actually start pushing us around again. So I appreciate the three gentlemen there in the ministerial benches. You're not in an easy position. It's an awkward one. And I'd be inclined to make the excuse that this difficulty you had in getting the numbers right could have been caused or exacerbated by the fact of having people pushing you around. Tell them to go to hell. Excuse me.
Thank you. Yeah, could I just call the Minister?
Thank you. I took the intervening time to get your figure, Deputy Donnelly, so apologies for not having it beforehand. Let me just go back on, it's 130 million based on the best guesstimates that were given as regards the volume of households, as I outlined earlier. The Deputy's Office can accept that or reject it, but they are the estimates that were given to me. In relation to Deputy Donnelly saying that you know, the charges, the costs are going to potentially be in excess of charges. There's a couple of things you need to bear in mind. Firstly, you can't include the 130 million. 130 million is an allowance that's given out to everyone and is not relative as regards comparing costs with charges of Irish Water. The cost of billing and metering is estimated to come in at 22 million.
Yes.
Okay, so that's 22 million. So if you want to deduct that from the 271 million, it comes into 249 million. This does not include the financing of the metering programme, which is a long-term financing cost, and as I repeated earlier on in the House, that comes on at 41 million. Now you can choose to deduct that as well if you so wish. And then you can choose, if you so wish, which I would disagree with, to deduct the 130 million, which is the cost of the grant. But you will see that even if you do that, that from a cost or from a revenue point of view, the revenue exceeds the costs as outlined.
130 goes to people who are not Irish water users.
Okay. All right, Deputy Billy Timmins has the floor.
Like, I appreciate what the Minister has said, and let's suppose we don't dispute his costs and he's refuting the argument that Deputy Donnelly's making that it actually cost, he's taken in more revenue, that it's actually cost him to finance the operation. Let's say we agree to that, agree in principle with that. Yeah, well, let's say, but to go back to, which is a mathematical issue, we're not dealing with something, this isn't a matter of opinion or anything, you're dealing with mathematical fact here with respect to the actual 1.3 million households. And there seems to be a mental block on the government side. And that's where there's a weakness. It's a mathematical fact that there's 1.65 million households, at least in the country. If a grant, you're saying if a grant went out to every eligible household, it's 1.3 million. So you telling me that there are 365,000 houses that are either holiday homes or empty. There clearly aren't. There's a certain percentage, there might be, even if there's 50,000, even if there's 100,000. Yeah, but if they all sign up, it has to be greater than 130 million. And that's where your argument doesn't stack up. Notwithstanding, I would beg to differ, like Deputy Donnelly may disagree with me, but if I give you the benefit of the doubt on the cost of financing the whole thing, the 1.3 million doesn't stack up. It doesn't stack up. Where have the 365,000 houses disappeared to?
Thank you. Deputy Barry Cowan.
Thank you. Yeah, it's obvious that the government have provided 130 million towards conservation grant aid. It's obvious that that's on the basis that there's 70 or 80% compliance. If there's 100% compliance, will the government commit to the extra 35 million? Okay? In the absence of that, I'm at a loss to understand the scientific basis for it being 130 million. Remember, there was 80 million spent on consultants. Irish Water have had this for the last 18 months. The government, the department, Bord Gosh, now Irish Water, with all the staff and expertise and the management levels and whatnot. And the best estimate is 130 million. And there's an acknowledgement that there's a 1.65 million houses. So if there was to be full compliance, it would have to be 160 million, not 130. So can they simply tell us where they got the scientific basis for making the guesstimate of 130 million? And do they accept that in the event of full compliance, that it will have to be more, and will they commit, will they make an adjustment to their estimates to allow for that to be paid? That's all.
Thank you. Deputy Brian Welch.
Minister, look, our Chairman, it's very clear here that what's happening here is the opposition are continually protesting here because they're not getting the answers that they want to hear that suits their own particular agenda. And it's equally clear that the opposition itself is confused in relation to these figures. When I came into the chamber an hour ago, they mentioned a figure of 2 million households. They now have adjusted that downwards to 1.6 million households. So they themselves are confused. They themselves are confused. In the space of an hour, they've lost almost 400,000 households. So they're confused themselves. The figure is 1.3 million. The difference between the 1.6 and the 1.3 is clearly the number of households that are unoccupied in the state. And Sinn Féin regularly stand up in the chamber and complain about the number of... Sinn Féin regularly stand up in this chamber and complain about the number of boarded up local authority houses, for example. Boarded up local authority houses. There are a number of holiday homes that will be excluded from the 1.6 million. And finally, regretfully, because of the irresponsible attitude presented by Sinn Féin and some of the other members opposite, there are a number of households who unfortunately will not register, so they will not be entitled to the €100 grant, and that makes up the difference between the number of households in the census and the number of households that will be in receipt of the €100 grant. Now, the Minister has spent the last hour and a half answering these questions. Obviously, the opposition is going to continually pose the questions because they're not getting the answer that suits their agenda. And I would appeal to them to move on to the next section of the bill. Right. These questions are beyond. The Minister, he has been asked very reasonable questions by Deputy Donnelly. He has been asked very reasonable questions by Deputy Donnelly, and he has undertook to write to Deputy Donnelly and the rest of the members present, if necessary, to give the specific details. But it's unreasonable to ask the Minister to be giving specific details in relation to some of the very specific questions that the Deputy has been asked. So we should move on from here.
Deputy, I'm sorry, Deputy Rushing Short Tall is first. Please.
Thank you for that clarification, Deputy Walsh. It's been very enlightening, I must say. If you'd been in here earlier for the rest of the debate, you might have understood the difficulties for people, because we've had no clarity at all from the Minister in this. And the figure of 2 million is the figure used by Irish Water. Irish Water sent out registration forms to 2 million homes. 2,008,000 in fact. So that's an Irish Water, an official figure. So somewhere out there, there's 2,008,000 homes or houses that got forms. Okay? The CSO tells us that there are 1.65 million households. Households.
Residential households. Yes.
And yet the Minister is only accounting for 1.3 million households who will be entitled to the grant. Now, there's a very substantial gap there.
Deputy Short,
you know, we're talking about a gap of between 35 or between 0.35 and 0.7 million in terms of households. Now, we're entitled to clarification on that, Minister. You haven't given us any clarification at all on that. In addition, I would say that some 2 hours ago, a number of us asked you two key questions. First of all, what is the estimated cost for Irish Water to administer the charges? Sending out invoices, processing the charges, sending reminders and so on. What is the cost of administering the charges? And the second question that was asked is, what is the estimated cost of administering the so-called conservation grant, which the Department of Social Protection will be sending out to every household in the country? So, what are those two key costs? And can you provide clarification on the number of households? Now, you know, there are only so many ways that you can phrase the question. It has been asked, you know, it's been asked. No, you haven't, Minister. Please. Nobody accepts that you've answered the question. There are key questions. Do you need those questions posed again, Minister? Provide clarity on the number of households. Tell us how much it will cost Irish Water, and tell us how much it will cost the Department of Social Protection to administer the grant. Three very clear, straightforward questions. If you're not in a position to answer those, which it seems that you're not, then we have no option but to adjourn this. It's becoming shambolic. We cannot continue like this in the absence of key information that is required. If you cannot provide the information now, let's adjourn, do the sensible thing and come back at a time when you are properly briefed.
Deputy Stanley, I'll call the Minister. Yeah. I just want to say that this is not for you, Deputy, for everybody, not to be irrelevant in your statements, and also I don't want too much repetition because we're having a lot of that. Deputy Stanley.
Okay. Look, the reason I raised this over an hour ago is to try and get some clarity in it because of the discrepancy in the figures. The full back up there, Deputy Welsh, who came in there about an hour and a half ago to play full back, if you just say that you're wrong what you said about Sinn Féin. Sinn Féin didn't tell people not to register, not register. The difference is, see, between me and you is that we don't tell people. We allow people to make up their own minds. You're not doing that. You're threatening them, right? So, to get back.
Section, please.
I see you're joining the full back line. I see you being joined from the bar in the full back line as well.
Yeah, on the section.
Just call them to order.
Section
the question here is that Irish Water sent out 2 million packs, okay? And the figures from the census say that there's 1.65 million households occupied. And this is the key point. In the legislation, and this is the reason I raised it, it says that shall only be paid to a house where the occupier of a dwelling, and it refers to the occupier of a dwelling, has registered, and it goes on about that, and has provided the information to the Minister for Social Protection. So we're clearly talking about occupied households. And you've clarified that where they're rented social local authority, voluntary housing, or, as described by the Clemens, private rented flats or apartments. So we're all on the one page here on this. The problem is that the figures don't add up, because there's a discrepancy between the households as defined in the bill and the ones that are set out in the census figures. And the census figures we always take to be accurate. You're going on a guesstimate. And you haven't clarified where the 1.3 million is. What I'm proposing, as the person who raised this here tonight, I'm proposing, Count Corley, right, that we end this here and now, that we adjourn, that the Minister and his officials come back here with figures to us here next Tuesday morning, so as we can continue this debate based on the information, proper information available to us, that we're not here, literally shooting in the dark. That's what's happening. We're here the other night. We're here the other night till 1:30, and they were hoping that this would be done out with the glare of the media. Okay. They were hoping that this would be done out with the glare of the media, that the boxes up there would be empty, everybody would be gone home. Here you are tonight trying to get this through without the proper figures. Okay. I'm proposing for seconder that we adjourn the House.
I'll deal with that in a moment. The point of order from Deputy.
Sorry, Count Corley, that's the formal proposal.
I know that. Okay.
And the seconder here.
I'll deal with that in a moment.
To second that, or at least to echo that, because Deputy Healy referred to the official way of doing this adjournment. Deputy Healy, you might like to remind the Chair of what you said, because I don't know.
Look at Deputy Healy isn't chairing, and neither are you, Deputy. Now, in fairness, that's Deputy Mattie McGrath has a question to ask as well.
Well, I have, because this has descended into total farce. I remember when early time when Minister Kelly took this over, he came out on television with an ashen-faced John Tierney. And I said to him on after, if he got John Tierney around every house in the country, he wouldn't change the people's minds. But now, clearly, they wouldn't find it. They never come back because they get lost. 365,000 houses missing. 1,000 for every day in the year. Should that have solved the homeless crisis in Europe, not to mind to say in Ireland? This is farcical, and I'm surprised with the legacy, man. Let me some legacy to Minister Kelly. My goodness, a legacy. 365,000 houses, and you can't account for them. Please adjourn before I walk out in disgust. I said before, you're making shame. I said before, you're making a show of Tipperary. And by God, you are.
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Stephen Donnelly.
Sir, thank you. Thank you for the numbers.
Yeah. Deputy Donnelly, you next.
Here's where I think we are. Your number is that 271 million would be raised in revenue. I appreciate the figure you've been given for the number of eligible households to the grant is 1.3 million. It would appear that if what you're saying is that every household gets it, that figure, the figure you've been given is wrong, right? It would appear that the figure, according to the CSO, is 166 million is what that would cost, right? That would appear to be the case, and I think we need clarification, which we can't get this evening. You stated that the annual cost of the meters would be about 41 million, and I accept that cost. I think that is that. Yeah, sure. I think that's probably a reasonable cost on the meters. And the final figure you gave, and I appreciate you getting it, is that the additional cost of billing would be 22 million a year. Now, figures I have are that actually it would be a lot higher, but I accept that's the figure you've been given, right? So here's where we are based on the figures we have tonight. 271 million raised, 166 million given back in grants, 41 million cost of metering, 22 million cost of billing. Now, I believe some of those figures would be higher, but they're the figures we're working on. Given those figures, Minister, the net benefit to the state of charging people for water, so the net benefit of people paying out 271 million euro would be 42 million euro. Now, if you assume that there is an administrative cost to the grants, which obviously there is, we don't know what it is, but let's assume it's 3%. A 3% administrative cost on the grants would add a further 5 million or so in costs, bringing the net benefit to the state from households paying out 271 million, a net benefit to the state, Minister, of 37 million euro. And that's if, Minister, the figures that you're being given on billing are correct. And based on what I've seen, they're very, very low. So where we are right now is that the people of Ireland will pay 271 million for their water, and the benefit to the state at best will be 37 million, and I think actually may be negative. So can I ask once more, and I won't ask again, but can I ask you just to reply to this? This case, whether or not there is a net benefit or cost to the state of charging people for water, is fundamental to this legislation. And can I ask, please, just in the interests of good parliamentary work and good legislative work on behalf of us all, can we please adjourn, come up with the figures? We have an independent expert. We have an independent. Okay. Minister, we have an independent expert who can look at the figures, which is the CEO. They already have an opinion paper on this. Let's just come back here next week with figures that everyone can agree on, please.
Thank you, Deputy Richard Boyd-Barrett.
Just to add one extra piece to Deputy Donnelly's maths, because if we take in all the figures that you're talking about, and then we add in a possible 36 million gap between your estimate of the number of households that will get the grant and the number of households that the CSO says exists, it brings you to 42 million, but you also haven't given us a figure for the maintenance costs for metering. You gave us the capital cost, broken down on an annual basis, but what about the maintenance costs of the metering? So that has to be added in as well, which is likely to bring it down further. And we don't know what the cost of the administration of the grant itself is. Deputy Donnelly gives a figure of 3% working at 5 million, but when you think it's costing 22 million for Irish Water to send out the bills, you know, we could be looking at a pretty significant figure, meaning that the net benefit to the state of levying these charges would be absolutely derisory, possibly as low as 20 million. So, I mean, I'm not really sure why you wouldn't want at this stage, because if I were you, I would want an adjournment. You haven't given us the figure for the you haven't given us a figure for the cost of administering the grant. You haven't given us a figure. Yeah, exactly. You don't have it, but it matters. Of course you de-aggregate it. Of course you de-aggregate the cost of administrating.
Deputy Richard Boyd-Barrett has the floor.
Now that is a very serious admission for you to say you don't disaggregate the cost of the department. Well, your maths is going to be very seriously out, right? Especially a Department of Social Protection that's already overrun, and where people are waiting months and months and months to get responses to appeals, and you're going to load all this extra work on them, and you haven't figured out how you're going to pay for it, what the extra cost is of the staff, the admin costs, and you haven't added it into this. Come on, that's ridiculous. Well, I just want to put it to you, Minister. To be honest, you're digging a big hole for yourself, and you'd be better off. Shh. Well, no, the point is, they will be looking. They will be looking, and independent scrutiny is going to take place of this debate and of the figures that you put out there. And the questions we're asking now will be asked writ large over the next few days, and if it is discovered that your maths was way out and you ran the bill through despite the fact that those questions, legitimate questions about the maths, were being raised, just imagine how bad it is going to be for you.
All right, Deputy Jonathan O'Brien wished to raise a question.
Minister, you said earlier when you came back in and you said that there was 1.3 million homes, you said that the best guesstimate we have. Now, I don't know who gave you that guesstimate. Maybe you can clarify that here now. Where did you get the figures? Because the figures that all of us are quoting, we're getting them from the CSO. So maybe you can tell us who gave you your guesstimate.
Deputy Lucinda Creighton.
Thank you very much, Askin Corla. I'm, I think, as perplexed as everybody else seems to be. Just to try and elicit some clarity from the Minister, Minister, could you tell me, or tell the House, whether the 1.3 million households equates to the figure of everyone who's entitled to register, or is it an estimate? Because they're two different things. Is it an estimate, or is it actually the figure which you believe is the total number of those entitled to register? If it's an estimate, or if your figure is that substantially less than the CSO figure of 1.65 million households, is that then potentially a concession from the very outset that 365,000 households will not, or the government does not expect, will actually register? So is that a sort of an admission of defeat from the very beginning, where you're saying that at a minimum you expect 365,000 households not to register?
Yeah, I've asked that question already that Deputy Creighton has asked, and like Deputy O'Brien, can the Minister inform the House what scientific basis did he approve 130 million? And, you know, where did the information emanate from? What expert or what advisor or what level of competence within Irish Water gave the information to the effect that the compliance rate will be such that you'll only have to pay out 130 million in these conservation grants?
Thank you.
Have we got that information? And if it's misinformation, let's find out where the misinformation emanated from, so somebody will have to be accountable. And you know, at the one point I'll make, tonight's proceedings prove the grave mistake that was made this time last year, when the legislation governing the initial charging mechanism instructing the CER to do it was as flawed as what we have here tonight, and it may have been. We may have had a lot of answers that have taken a year to get in the meantime because of.
Thank you, Mr. State Paddy Coffey.
Thank you, Last Count Corla. And I think, you know, the opposition quite cleverly are trying to be obstructive by. You're being very obstructive by trying to stitch the allocation for what is a conservation grant that will allow people across the country, both rural and urban, a €100 payment to assist them conserve water in their households. That is not an Irish water expenditure. It's an allocation. It's an estimated allocation. It's an estimated allocation allocated by the government to assist people conserve water. It has nothing to do with Irish water expenditure. Now let us be clear. Let us be clear here. Let us be clear here. Let us be clear here. It's a conservation grant allocated to households to assist them conserve water. It is not an Irish water expenditure. You are cleverly trying to obstruct the debate, and it's your form of protest on the floor of the Dáil by trying to stitch it, into Irish water expenditure. That's what you're doing. That's essentially what you're doing. There is nothing stopping the government evaluating the number of registrations for this grant, and if indeed there is more registrations, the grant will be paid to those people. The allocation that has been made in the estimate is €130 million, and if that needs to be upped, it will be upped. That's simple as. Thank you, Lasker.
Thank you. Now, Deputy Joe Higgins and Deputy Tommy Bruin.
Actually, if the Minister had come up front immediately and said that in fact his departmental advisors or number crunchers had figured out the following, that there are indeed 1,650,000 households in the state who are entitled to the €100 grant, and the Minister says it's 1,300,000. If he had then gone on and told us that his department is estimating that 350,000 households will refuse to pay and therefore won't be entitled, according to his rules, to get the 100. That would explain the gap. So why don't you just do that, and we could have moved on 2 hours ago?
Thank you. Deputy Thomas Brown.
Thanks, Cathaoirleach. Well, I think the shambles that we've witnessed for the last few hours from Ministers Kelly and Coffey, it's reminiscent, I think, of that Heron Dempsey moments 4 or 5 years ago when neither of these senior ministers had a clue about the bankruptcy of the country, of the fact that the blanket bank guarantee had actually bankrupted our country. It's a very similar situation. They knew nothing about a key element of the figures that they were supposed to be supervising government, and you remember that particularly well, in fact, Cathaoirleach. We're left with, however we look at the numbers on the conservation grant on this section, however you look at it, it does seem that the 271 million, in fact, is evaporating. It's evaporating like the 40% of the water that Deputy Minister Kelly was talking about being wasted from the current delivery systems. But it's just evaporating before our eyes, and we haven't a clue as to what the real figures are, what the real income, the revenue from the domestic sector. For example, I mean, you can bet your life, Minister Kelly, there will be 1.65 million households in the coming general election of the doors that we have to visit. In my own case, I think it's 49,000 in Dublin Bay North, the new Dublin Bay North. There will be, and I know Deputy Stagg there behind, he'll be assiduous in going to every one of the whatever number of houses it is in Kildare, the 50,000 in Kildare. We'll certainly know there will be 1.65 million households, you know, not too far. Sorry?
In the long grass.
Yeah, they'd be waiting all right for the government in that long grass behind the garden wall, and they'd be raising this night when we found we didn't know what the figures were, we didn't know what the income was, and it goes back to the broader question about Irish water. It goes back to the broader question about Irish water. When you came in here, Minister, and you made the legacy speech, the famous legacy speech about what would happen now, you didn't give us the numbers. And we had to go back to our offices, get onto Twitter, and then we got some figures, I think, if I recall, about an hour or 2 hours later, we got some basic figures about the whole parameters of Irish water. But we still don't know how it's going to work. These useless meters, this 500–600 million that we spent on it, and that, you know, constituents tell us, ringing us up and saying, women constituents, they put on their boiler suits, they're lying on the ground trying to lift the lid and have a look at the meter, and finding it totally impossible to read. You have a kind of the whole thing from start to finish. It is kind of Alan in Wonderland stuff. It's farcical, well, except Azerbaijan and ourselves. But we had a good reason. We had a good reason for it. You remember. You opposed water charges, Deputy Howland, with me. You stood beside me, shoulder to shoulder. We stood together and we defeated and destroyed a whole system of water charges for Deputy Ahern in the mid-1990s. We stopped it, and Deputy Ahern, to be fair to him later on, went on into Europe and said, this is something the Irish do differently. We do it differently because we live in a rain-sodden country where water is so freely available. It has to be produced, it costs money, but we decided to do it from general taxation. But we're left in a situation where this Irish water quango, the numbers, we don't know the global numbers because Minister Kelly didn't give them to us the day he came in here, as I said, and made his famous speech. We come back here tonight, everything is a total shambles. I would say again, Minister, to the two ministers, go home, go back to your departments, or department, and do your homework, adjourn for a couple of days and come back in here and try and give us some numbers that we can actually discuss, because these numbers, they do not add up. And in fact, it's not fair to the House, it's not fair to the opposition, and it's not fair to the people. We don't know where we are. It looks like it's going to cost us, after all this schmozzle, all this turmoil, it's going to cost us money to collect these taxes.
Right, Deputy Mattie McGrath.
Thank you, Les Cathaoirleach. It brought to my attention during my contribution a few minutes ago that Minister Alan Kelly has expressed very nasty expletive to me across the House. I didn't hear him, but I wanted records checked, and I want an apology if he used those kinds of foul language to me as an elected representative of the people of Tipperary. I might be robust in what I say, but I'm not going to insult and use denigrating language. So I'll give him a chance to reflect. He needs to reflect on a lot of stuff tonight and go back and learn his thumbs.
All right. Deputy Stanley. I'm sorry, your colleague, Deputy Doherty, first. He had a minute. Well,
€100 grant.
Sorry?
We started off with this €100 that they take €100 off us with this hand in taxation, hand it back to us in this hand if you pay for it, and then it's counted as income for Irish Water. It's fantasy economics, and we know now that we have fantasy figures here tonight. We had Minister Coffey go up a minute ago, and I want to address the point that Minister Coffey made. He stood up and he said that if more money is needed, to fund it, we'll provide it, right? So that means that he's talking about the numbers that they expect to register as opposed to the number of households. While the minister beside him, for an hour and a half, said he was talking about the number of occupied households. So the two ministers can't even agree on this. We have fantasy figures, fantasy economics, and we have a fantasy bill. And we should quit this here tonight. I'm proposing again that we adjourn this till Tuesday to give the Minister and the department officials to come back here with proper figures. The whole thing is a bloody farce, and we should call it off.
Deputy Doherty, Pierce Doherty. Please, Deputy Pierce.
Giving people €100 with no conservation. €100 with no conservation. Where's the conservation?
Deputy Stanley, I've called.
Conservation, and you know that.
I've called Deputy Pierce Doherty. Deputy Doherty.
Yes, Ken Corley, Deputy Coffey, just to pick up on that, wants to suggest that the conservation grant, as he said in his own words, has nothing to do with Irish Water. Yet the legislation that we're dealing with here, which isn't government spin, is that you have to actually pay your Irish Water bill to be able to get the concentration. Yeah, no, but you're saying it's for people who are availing of public water. You have to pay your Irish Water bill to get this. That is the reality, and that is the majority. And how can you square, Minister? How can you square a statement that this has nothing to do with Irish Water when in the legislation, if you are in receipt of public water, then you have to pay the bill or you will not get it. And in relation to the conservation, we all know it's not to do with conservation, it's to do with trying to sweeten the pill for people to accept these water charges so that you at a later stage can increase them at a later stage. I have made it very clear in relation to what this, I believe, the conservation grant. I think you're on thin ice in relation to this, in relation to the market corporation test, and we will know what will happen if we fail the market corporation test. We will have Labour here, as you've done in the past, saying with your Frankfurt way or Labour's way, well, Europe told us we can't actually do it, otherwise we will fail the market corporation test. So the first thing that will go will be the €100 sweetener. But at the end of the day, we all know where this is going. I want to take this in baby steps for the government. The question that has been occupying the Dáil for the last nearly 2 hours now has been, and I've listened to the bluster from yourselves and the backbenchers in relation to this matter. But the question that is being asked is a simple one. It's about the figures. It's about the back-of-envelope guesstimates, as the Minister has enlightened us with, that this is all guesstimate work in relation to this conservation grant. But can I ask you, either of the Ministers, do you accept that in 2011 there were 1,654,208 private households? Now, for the backbenchers who tried to confuse the matter of private households and holiday homes and so on and so forth, let me tell you what the definition is that is contained within the census, was on the census form, and is contained within the CSO release in 2011. It says, a private household, in the census, private households is defined as either one person living alone or a group of people living at the same address with common housekeeping arrangements. A household can contain one or more families. So that makes it clear that these are people living in these houses. 1.654 million of those households. So can the Minister first of all confirm that he accepts the census, He accepts what was said in the census. He accepts the CSO figure that there are indeed, or there were indeed in 2011, that amount of households in the state. If you actually look at that release, you will also note that in the last 20 years, the number of households have increased by over 60%. Those figures are nearly 4 years out of date. If we're in line with trends that we've seen over the last 2 decades, then that has increased quite rapidly as well. So we're not talking about a gap of the 350,000. It's likely to be more because of the increase of demographics and therefore the increase of households. But can you accept that those households do exist? And then the second thing is, if you do accept where the households exist in the first place, is it the case that you are, based on your own figures, expecting a 22% non-compliance with Irish water? Is that what the government has done? Because the gap between census figures and your own figures suggest 22% non-registration. I believe the figure will be a lot higher, but I would like the government to enlighten us in relation to those 2 basic facts. Do you believe that the households are actually there? And are you assuming or guessing that there will be 22% non-compliance, so therefore you will only have to pay out the €100 to 78% of the households that existed in 2011?
Thank you. Deputy Welsh, were you indicating? No? Yeah.
Everything that is wrong with Irish politics at the moment, and it's no wonder that the Irish public, listening to the members opposite, it's no wonder that they have become disillusioned. It's no wonder they have become disillusioned with Irish politics. I'm looking here at an article here, front page article in the Irish newspaper in the north, dated Wednesday. Yes, it is. It's very relevant.
Please,
it's very relevant.
I'll share this now.
I'll come to you next, Deputy Brown. The Irish News, dated Wednesday, November the 26th, 2014, less than 3 weeks ago. The headline reads, 35,000 water meters installed in homes in Northern Ireland. Stormont deception as infrastructure necessary for fees is quietly put in place. This is where our friends opposite. Deputy, the deputies talk about bluster. Look to your left and to your right when you want to see bluster. This is where Sinn Féin are administering in the north of Ireland, quietly putting in the meters.
Well,
I listened to Deputy Bruin's observations here. There wasn't a single vote cast, not one vote cast in the 31st Dáil when Deputy Bruin was a member of an organisation, the Labour Party, that signed up in the programme for government for the introduction of water charges. I don't recall any objection. The Labour Party signed up to a programme for government which would include the provision of. I don't recall any strenuous objection by Deputy Bruin. And the member to his right, who I have a great deal of regard for, accepted a ministerial position in the government that proposed to introduce such charge. So you're both speaking out of both sides of your mouth on this occasion.
Thank you, Deputy Joe Higgins.
Last count call. Regrettably, this has descended into farce because of the government's either inability to answer simple questions or its refusal to answer questions because it wants to cover up a number of issues. Now, the questions that Deputy Doherty just asked there are what we've been asking here for 2 hours at least. And as clearly put as he put it. And the 3 musketeers on the front bench of the government here, or maybe the 3 stooges would be more appropriate considering the type of disaster that we've had tonight, are incapable of either giving us the answer or don't want to give the answer because they want to cover up. They want to.
Point of order, sir.
Hang on,
Minister.
They want.
Members of the House like that.
Call
names.
I think, Deputy, I'm waiting. I think, Deputy, that word is not parliamentary.
Which word?
The word stooge.
Stooge. Okay.
I'd ask you, please. Sorry, I'd ask. I didn't hear that.
Okay.
No, sorry, no, Deputy. No,
okay.
sorry. Yeah, that's. Sorry, we'll check that. Could I ask you to withdraw that?
Yes, Deputy Howland, Minister Howland, and the other two ministers are not stooges. Okay.
That's withdrawn. That's withdrawn.
They're not stooges, right?
All right, sorry, Deputy. Okay. No, please. Deputy Joe Higgins says this.
They're just acting like that. Now, Deputy Seamus Healy made a proposal, and I, according to the standing order and in the proper way, want to make that proposal formally, which is Standing Order 23.2. That a motion that a sitting be suspended for a period may at any time be made by permission of the Council and without notice. Such motion shall fix the period of suspension. So I propose that this Dáil adjourns until Tuesday next at 2 o'clock, whereupon the government may have the answers to the questions that have been asked here for the last 2 hours, and allow clarity. I don't think tomorrow is time enough for you. Because we've made absolutely no progress over 2 hours. It'll take a little bit more than overnight. So I propose that the Dáil adjourns until 2 o'clock on Tuesday, and that the government comes back with the answers which will facilitate this crucial debate to continue. I formally move.
Yeah.
I made that proposal about an hour ago. I had hoped that the Minister would do the decent thing and do the right thing and offer the adjournment himself. He hasn't done that, so I think that we are left with no choice but to request the Council to adjourn this sitting until next Tuesday at 2 p.m.
Minister to respond. Minister to respond. I know there are other speakers, but I'll call if there's time. Yeah.
Firstly, in relation to Deputy McGrath, I'm not aware if I did, but if I did, I withdraw it and apologise. Okay? It wasn't my intention. If I made a statement, you asked me if I said something. If I did say something involuntary, I withdraw it and I apologise. Okay? I've given the figures. You look for answers. I've given you answers. The fact is, you don't want the answers. You don't like the answers. Wait a second now. At least give me the chance to reply, despite all your commentary. This is a demand-led scheme, all right? Of course we have census figures. Who's going to stand up here inside the Dáil and say that census figures are wrong? However, it's a demand-led scheme. Right? And our estimate is 1.3 million. Now, let me make 2 points in relation to this. Firstly, if there are more people who register, well, of course, then we'll be happy to pay them the 100 million. But I may also point out that, or the 100 euros, that may also point out that this is not a cost to Irish Water or a benefit to them. I mean, you can add up the equations and do them whatever you want, but it is not a cost to Irish Water. It's a government initiative that's a water conservation grant. Now, look at all the people who are getting this grant. Right? But look at all the people. Look at all the people in Tipperary, in Galway, in Kerry, who all have been paying for water for decades, thousands and thousands of euros in many cases, who have been servicing their wells, who have been in group water schemes, and working very hard in relation to this, and paying for them. Do they not deserve to be getting a grant to be able to ensure that they can do that appropriately and to be able to manage their schemes and manage their well and service their costs the same as everyone else? They have been paying for water for decades. They've been paying for water and I don't see anyone going down and protesting about the fact that they've had to pay for water for many decades. Right? It's such a valuable resource, and this is not unique. It's such a valuable resource that I think that the grant going to people like that is very well deserved. And in fact, it's something that's been very welcomed in rural Ireland from my travels. Now, so that's 130 million. Now, if that is, which is a demand-led scheme, and if that increases, so be it. That will be a successful thing in many ways. I've also outlined to the House, for the figures that were requested, that the billing and metering costs were coming in at 22 million. Now, these are figures that are given to me. I take them. These are the costs, right? You can say they're lower, Deputy, if you wish, but these are the costs. Right? They are given to me. I've also outlined to the House that this does not include financing of metering programme, which is long-term financing costs of approximately 41 million. Right? So they're the costs, and it quite clearly shows that the costs are less than the revenue. And that was the ultimate question that was asked. I've outlined that the costs in relation to the water conservation grant should not be taken as part of this equation. Now, I've outlined this to the House. I had to wait nearly an hour there to outline them back again. I've outlined them to the House. Maybe you don't like them. Maybe some of the deputies don't like them. But they are the facts in relation to what has been asked here tonight.
Thank you, David. Minister, wish to address that issue of the standing order that quoted. I'm sorry. Yeah, no, I'm asking that. No, the Minister doesn't. That's fine. No, I have offerings from Deputy Shortall, Boyd Barrett, Donnelly, and now Timmins. Well, we only have 9 minutes left, so I'm Deputy Shortall. Anyways, next on the list.
Deal with my proposal under Standing Order 23.
If there's no other proposal, could you resume your seat, please? I happen to be doing the order of business this morning, and I did note that the government proposed we sit till 10 p.m. That was decided on by the House. I'm also looking at the standing order that you quoted, Deputy Higgins. It doesn't change tomorrow's order, just to make that clear, first of all, but it does state that the House can be suspended for a certain period, and I understand that would have to go to a vote of the House. So that's the only. If I take that from the standing order, is that right? Yeah. I'm sorry. Is the Minister?
Just to help the House. The House is due to adjourn in 8 minutes.
Yeah.
So a motion to adjourn when will take more than 8 minutes to do. It's farcical.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm only.
Very clear demonstration from the Minister that indeed he can count. And if the Minister and the Government could actually just inform us in relation to the numbers that we've been looking for the last 2 years, there would have been no need for this. Yes. But we still have not answers from the Minister in relation to the amount of non-compliance that has been built into the figures that have been suggested. The Minister has, after given us a suggestion that he does accept the 1.64 million houses existed in 2011. He's now saying that he expects a level of non-compliance. I said it would be 22% of the overall, but not all of those households are customers of Irish Water. So it appears that he expects, at least in terms of private accommodation, non-compliance of over 30%, and that is not including second homes and so on and investment properties. So can the Minister, if the Minister cannot give these basic answers, I believe that, as has been asked in the motion that is in order, we should have a vote.
Yeah. Okay. Deputy Buttimer wanted. Okay. Well, I have no issue with that, but I just want to make the point that there's. Well, I'm sorry, Deputy. I can do. Please, I can do that. The
problem is he's saying is adjourned until tomorrow. It's superseded. No, if Glasgow Corla, just on a point of order.
Chair, when you're in the chair, whether or not you take the proposal. It is now 5 minutes to the time that the House was ordered to actually finish its business, and it's nonsense to propose a motion of adjournment.
Obstructionism, that's all it is. Obstructionism.
So you have absolute discretion, Chair.
Yeah, just one moment.
Proposed the adjournment over an hour ago. Over an hour ago.
It was in the chair last Concola, and in accordance with standing orders, actually Deputy Healy's proposal wasn't correct. The only proposal that was valid, if I may, Deputy Healy, sorry, if I may, the only proposal that was valid was Deputy Higgins's one just a minute ago. Deputy Higgins's proposal was the only one that was valid.
The record will show that Deputy Buttermore was not in the chair. Yes. You yourself had taken. Yes. You yourself, last young board, had taken the chair.
Proposal. Deputy, sorry, there's clarification. There's a proposal kind of to adjourn the House for a specific period, which was till Tuesday. If that's accepted, that supersedes any other proposal that was an order of business. Kind of you indicated that it didn't supersede the sitting tomorrow. It does, in fact, because it is yes, but it is a later vote, which means it supersedes everything else. So if it is put to a vote at this stage, it is to adjourn till Tuesday.
Said the next speaker was Deputy Roisin Shortall, and there's only 4 minutes left, so Deputy Shortall wins to win. I'm going to. But I have discretion on that. No, sorry, Deputy Shortall. Well, Deputy Shortall, then Deputy Boyle Barrett was the next person to speak. I have
There's a proposal, and if you're putting it, you need to put it now. I
have discretion on that.
He hasn't ruled. He hasn't ruled.
Please.
He suggested. Sorry. I'm not saying he doesn't speak.
Yeah. Sorry. What? Yeah. Okay. I told. Yeah. No. It's not. Sorry. It's very clear that the adjournment is only for today. Deputy Donnelly, do you want to speak? There's only a few minutes remaining, and I'm quoting this. No, I'm not. I'm quoting the standing order. I'm quoting this. Please. All right. Deputy Shortall. Deputy Shortall is. Sorry. Deputy Shortall is only a few minutes remaining. Please.
Okay, you've given a ruling, then Lascian Cordia. I would hope that the Minister takes the opportunity overnight to consult with his officials and come back when he's in a position to answer the many questions that have been raised here tonight. We've been at this now since 7 o'clock or so, posing questions, and we haven't had answers. I asked you about an hour ago if a regulatory impact assessment had been done on your revised proposals. You didn't answer that question. If it had been done and made available, we would all know whether this thing actually stacks up or not. Just to remind you, Minister, just to remind you of the homework that needs to be done overnight. First of all, Minister, you need to explain the huge discrepancy between the figures of 1.35 million households that you're using compared 1.3 million households that you're using compared to the CSO figure of 1.65 million and compared to the 2 million households that Irish Water is using. You need to give us a figure to explain how much it's estimated it will cost for the Department of Social Protection to issue grants of €100 to every household in the country. You need to tell us what is the administrative cost for Irish Water to invoice every household and process charges 4 times a year next year. Now, just a second, yourself and the junior minister beside you, a short while ago, excuse me, made the point that if you got the figures wrong, you would pay the extra grants. Now, it's not as simple as that, because if you got the figures wrong, that has serious implications for the financial viability of this entire project. And of course the so-called conservation grant has to be taken into consideration. Minister, Minister, I'm finishing with another question which might help us if you can answer. You used the figure here tonight of €271 million for the proceeds of the charges the estimated proceeds of the charges from domestic water charges. Can you tell us? The number of households on which that figure is based?
I would ask the Minister to move that the debate be adjourned. Minister. Minister, move. So, Dollar Acklogagy, Jack Logger Majid, the Dol stands adjourned at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. Thank you.